Stanisław Barszczak, titled Philip Dressed in Hemp or How to Be Happy. A teacher comes to a lost village to spread the torch of education. Do you remember the Polish film Konopielka from the 80s of the last century? The so-called civilization that suddenly appears in Taplar's village is causing a real storm. Why eat from separate plates when one bowl has been enough for centuries? Why on earth should you use a size where you can have a sickle? Mr. Philip, in an artistic soul, could think of this type endlessly. A week ago he returned from vacation. There he drowned his watch in the Black Sea. Imagine the same or similar was waiting for him after returning to Poland. Mr. Philip had another day of community work behind him. He was middle-aged, always neatly dressed, with a distinctive white hat. He was still meeting with Joasia, to whom he said that history is now being forgotten. It was not a harm for him, maybe only historical justice, this meeting. The limit of harm lies in conscience. It lies in the human heart. At time, he felt a wild rage. He had the formal impulse to stand up and slap this beautiful woman between the eyes with his fist. Then he always saw his mother saying, "A little Philip, behave properly," said the mother, "because the officer will take your broadswords and cut off your head." Quote end. Where is the pit of death in which this most tender heart has been extinguished, an unseen and unheard of heart, burned from eternal feelings? Shadow is painful. However, death has its good sides, noticed Miss Joasia to him. Mr. Philip surrendered to the charm of human civilization. The more complicated the technology becomes, the greater the need to create an organization capable of keeping it under control, said the nurse on duty at the suburban clinic. He always wanted to be a doctor of conscience. Meanwhile, he went to surgery. If they come to me for advice, let them listen to it. Otherwise, I do not heal at all. If I do not destroy the sources of death, he said when Joasia looked into his eyes. A man has shallow eyes. Everyone can see what is at the bottom, a stingy or a false person, whether he has sin on his conscience or his painful life. A peasant, when he reaches out, he swears. When he gets, he stops. He remembered his time at the clinic now. It is the end of his duty. Late afternoon, he has seen the last patient, so he could indulge his imagination. But the light in the corridor had already come on. Wishing you a peaceful night, Mr. Philip went out into the yard to light an opal. Having passed the Rondo ONZ and Mirowski Park, he reached Halamirowska. He was at home, big supermarket. He was at home and welcomed his closest homeland. Narrow passages among stalls and shops, he passed by the cashier. The heat of the sun gave way to the sight of full shelves of grapefruit, oranges, and jam. Here it is as if the Warsaw happiness of an individual was subordinated to the common good. You are geniuses in Poland, even though I do not know how I got lost in my travels around the world. He remembered. You will straighten all my tense matters for me here. Mr. Philip was reflecting as he walked along Alea of John Paul II towards himself. For in the central one, you are always waiting for me 1 day in advance. In Poland. For my part, I would like to constantly repay you, for I have received all that I need. I must give what I have taken, namely the sweetness and joy of my generation. This damned debt. I have neither father, nor mother, no wife, not a single thing that I would press to my heart with love until these vile nightmares disappear from the face of the earth. I must renounce my happiness. I must be alone now, so that no one is next to me, no one holds me, no one of the living can be given such reverence in mind, sacred veneration as those who remain behind us in the darkness of the oblivion. So for some time now I have been breaking and looking for the sight of joy. Now in the eyes of his imagination he find it at Morskie Oko Sea in the Polish Tatras mountain. The lake reflects mountains and trees. I know other people think well, and I know what I need. A friend once wanted to remind you that a primary school in Ząbkowice village of his youth. Immediately he thought, Abraham was a bad son, and instead of obeying his father Terah and honestly selling clay idols in the bazaar, he obeyed a god who was not known to anyone at that time, made a covenant with him unnecessarily, and went to some land from which he was later driven out several times. I don't remember it exactly because I don't live much, but I go in love with Israel constantly. Mr. Philip was remembering. Abraham walked with Sarah, who would bear him Isaac. This chosen people, this fiancée, with an excuse, has broken bones. She is in pain like Job, battered, burned in fire. Can something like that, like this? Indeed, God also likes pretty women. And sometimes I am punished to reflect on the mystery of death. The latter is the only thing we have not been able to completely vulgarize. I rarely go to the cemetery. It seems to me that the dead man laughs in his heart at those who cry for him as if they were talking to him. It would be good if you were still alive in this world, suffered a lot of suffering and caused much bitterness, Mr. Philip said. When there is no war, nothing is so important, and in a war it is not known what little thing can be saved. Meanwhile, I try to include in the everyday life of human civilization of the third millennium. Love drives away fear, but conversely, fear limits love. And I think so, man does not remember the first day in his life. And if he doesn't know his birthday, let him not know the day of his death. God, thank you for this, and do today so that I do not know if the last day has come. Make that today is not the end of life. Apparently, it must be so now that they call us the enemy. Only my little homeland is like Austria in Europe, and I am still sailing to my Ithaca island. So I would like you to see my little ship shake in the black water. Will he be saved or not? I do not suppose that people have a destiny for themselves. Here I believe, and I ask myself, what would the world be worth if it had not been for human wildness? What would the world be worth if man did not grow wiser with age? With me, Thomas Mędrzak and Monika Roska, actors and heroes of the first version of a novel by Henryk Sienkiewicz, In Desert and Wilderness, Staś and Nell Adventures, Mr. Philip thought. Once, 30 million Poles went to the cinemas to watch this film. They have certainly started families and they are doing well now, but each person always gets what they ask for. Mr. Philip was already on the balcony in his own house. Yesterday, Joasia was telling him about his vacation and his farmhouse. I choked furiously. I choked left and right, top, bottom, and side, waved my axe and thought nothing. Joasia, thanks for this sip of oblivion, and don't forget about me on. From time to time I strengthened up in my back to catch my breath. After gasping for a moment, I threw myself again on the protruding knots, starting from the beginning, from the butt, and continuing along the trunk to the end of the tree, to the branched crown, where of course he was. Dreams of my vacation with God came true. I turned the winter of forest people into a hot summer evening among my friends. Mr. Philip dreamed. Man is a sacred thing that must not be harmed by anyone. Man persuaded himself that his life is too short. Therefore, he used to explain himself to the constant lack of time. Only say, if he lived twice as long, would he have had more? I doubt it. If someone managed to construct a clock that would measure a man's wasted, empty and full time devoted to some benefit, even his own, it would turn out that he had wasted most of his life. So maybe life is given to us in excess anyway. Or maybe you need to create a separate subject at school entitled In Search of Wasted Time. Now, it seems to me that you should always stand in one line or the other and want something, do something, work and put your whole soul and live with all the passion. Mr. Philip felt the peace of immeasurable happiness within himself. He ran through some wizarding wells. It was flowing in a green stream of light. He was in the universe, Billions of suns swayed around as if flowers were white, yellow, and purple. Countless swirls of flames ran across the spaces. He was everywhere, and he could not want to. He was melted, penetrating, present everywhere. To live is to act, to spread talent, energy, affection around the world, to help future generations in the present. Here, Mr. Philip looked from the balcony to the highest skyscrapers in the capital of Poland. Life doesn't give us what he wants, it only gives us what it has for us. Some floors were already illuminated. Immediately, his gaze drowned in the greenery of the park. Down. Man's greatest good is that he can forget, otherwise he cannot live completely. The reality is made of the same yarn of as dreams. So speaking, Mr. Philip entered the dining room. A table was full of books there. The famous Warsaw surgeon felt tired and quickly went to sleep. When the next day he got up to go to work, the sun was rising, the day was complete, because the larks were suddenly rising to the sky, and the morning anthem was trembling in the air. And then the voice of the signature flew around the rondo on the Rondo Street. Ren woke, rejoiced.